Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Sean Pertwee. How are you, sir?
Very good. How are you?
I know you from a movie. Everybody knows you right now from Gotham, but I know you from a movie that I saw as a kid going into the teenage years and still watch to this day, and it absolutely terrifies me all the time. A movie called Event Horizon.
Oh, yeah. My gosh, yeah.
I think it's one of the most underrated as far as those thriller / space horror kind of movies, where it was always one I told people about, and they're like, I never heard of it.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, you got to watch Event Horizon because it's just seriously messed up.
Yeah,
and the fact that it's being isolated out in space where there's no one to help makes it even worse.
That's right. It was a haunted house movie in space. That was what we tried to sort of achieve.
Right.
And it's still got legs. It's really weird. I mean, after all these years, and I think what was clever was they used a lot of models with CGI, early CGI to many respects, and it also looked sort of grimy and dirty. It looked for real. I mean, the sets they built this, the Lewis and Clark, it was actually built on gimbals. The whole thing actually was, had a sort of aft foredeck. It was split where there was 2 floors to it. The whole thing would move as one, as a ship. We used to have money in films, you know.
But I think that's what makes it hold up, even though it wasn't a blockbuster by today's means. Even by then, those means, it was one of those movies I guess just became a cult hit.
That's right. Yeah.
And the fact that you were using sets instead of, like, a lot of people would tend to overdo it when brand new technology comes out. Everything has to be that brand new technology. You don't use the traditional ways anymore.
Adrian Biddle lit it, who of course lit Blade Runner and stuff like that. So we had the 007 stage at Pinewood, which was that huge meat grinder thing. Which I've never seen a sort of set that large. I've ever been involved in anything that was sort of built to that sort of extent. It was a huge thing, and there was only 6 of us in it, so it was a real experience as a young actor to be in a film that cost that much money. And but what I'm proud about, it still has got legs. It still exists.
Whenever I'm not even saying when it's on cable,
it's on Netflix and stuff like that now.
Yeah, but I have the DVD. Sometimes I'll just go downstairs and go, you know what? I think I want to watch that again. You watch it and just.
It's the whole build up to it, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, when you actually see Sam Neill as the monster, I think that spoiler, sorry. When you actually see him as a monster, it gets less scary, but it's the build up that, like you said, that thing of being in the middle, no one can hear you scream kind of vibe. It's just terrifying.
Right, and that's another thing too. I think the fact that you don't see exactly what's going on for so long until the end. I guess it's the old theater of the mind where no matter what it is being portrayed, it's never as good as what you think it is in your head. Right.
And that was the idea. They changed it. The studio slightly changed it. Was the ship, of course, is the conduit to this other level, which is hell. So when you come into contact with the actual ship, that's when you got these sort of images.
Right.
You got these images of because you were the mouth of the black hole going into this other dimension. So, but they sort of they didn't think the audience would get that, so they sort of chipped away at that, and I think that's where it sort of lost its way slightly.
Do people still bring this movie up to you? When they do
that and Dog Soldiers, which is a werewolf movie that we did. Neil Marshall, who does Game of Thrones and stuff like that now, but it was his first sort of foray into cinema, and that is the one that still has, for me, people talk about the most.
Right.
Is that an Event Horizon? These are cult classics in my country. I don't know about people are beginning to see it here. Actually, Dog Soldiers here now.
People, nowadays, especially a younger audience, know you as Alfred on Gotham right now, which is Monday nights 8 p.m. on Fox. But before we delve into all my little nerdy questions about that, when did you start working? I mean, I know you started in, I guess, roughly in the late 80s with acting, but when did you start doing like your first American productions?
Well, I worked for American companies. I'd done a couple of movies. I did Soldier with Kurt Russell. So I was doing sort of big old movies. I used to mainly do films. I very rarely did any television, actually, to be honest. I started off in the theatre and went straight into film. Started a film company with Jude Law, Johnny Lee Miller.
Some good partners to have.
Yeah, not bad, not too shabby. And we started this company, Natural Nylon. So, and then I was working for American companies, but not normally in America, apart from Soldier.
I guess that's what I'll rephrase my question then. When did you start working, actually doing productions in America?
Really was the first one was Soldier, and then was years later was Elementary, which I did an episode with my mate Johnny, and then they brought me back as Lestrade, and they flew me over to do some 3 or 4 episodes over here, and that's really how I got Gotham.
Doing Elementary, you did a handful of episodes as Gareth on Elementary here in the United States. How do you think that compares to what BBC is doing with Sherlock?
There's no comparison whatsoever, really. I mean, it's really interesting because everyone at this time, I mean, Cumberbatch was doing a version of Frankenstein with Johnny, and they both were going off to play Sherlock. Jude, our other friend, was playing Watson. I was playing Lestrade. We were all in Sherlock in some capacity.
In some form, yeah.
So, but they're not the same shows. I mean, they're completely different. Gatiss is doing the English version. It's become much more, for me, much more like Doctor Who, which is not my ideal. I mean, I'm just really plethora of people shouting at the radio station now, but it's not. I just find it. I love the earlier episodes of Benedict's version. And I just think that the Johnny's is the American version is it has the essence. It has the essence of an Englishman in New York, and him being the outside sort of element looking in. And I think that it's sort of an enduring thing, and people really love it and accept it. And I think when they're on 4th season now, aren't they? And God knows how the pace that those guys work. I mean, having done a few, it's just extraordinary how Johnny achieves it is extraordinary. I mean, the thing is that the pace is completely different in England when you work in England, especially on TV, because we only do 6 episodes, or sometimes 8.
Yeah, you have shorter series.
Yeah, as opposed to 22 here. When we start Gotham, it's like looking up the north face of the eye. You're going, well, I'll be here for the next 10 months, and it's a long, grueling work. It's about getting your head down and doing and continuing the work and continuing the standard. I think that it is when you do shows like Sherlock, probably in England, the BBC have much more time, and more space to experiment.
Well, doing it in America, I know financially it's better for you doing an American series, but artistically it's kind of grueling as compared to what you're doing over in the UK.
No, not necessarily, because the thing is, like, it's sort of reached. We're talking about elementary still. It's sort of reached. It's sort of reached its. It's got its own sort of heartbeat and following now. Very few shows exist like that in England. That is so. They're like machines. I mean, they have so many people that work on them and that write on them, and they're sort of the intellect. I don't know where they're pulling these stories from, but they just seem to rifle through newspapers and find things that have happened that they draw from.
It's almost like Law and Order.
Yeah, and it's of a higher standard, I think, and of a higher acting quality as well. I think Johnny and both Lucy, I think, are absolutely sort of phenomenal. So to be involved in a show like that it's like getting smelling salts. It certainly wakes you up. And then being lucky enough to be involved in a show that's long running and that I'm very proud of, which is almost filmic. I think one of the worst reviews that we got from season 1 saying 40 minutes longer, it could have been a movie. So that's bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just always wondered, because of Sherlock being such an icon in history for the UK, to have an American interpretation almost seems a little blasphemous.
Yeah, but it's not a genuine take of the original Sherlock, though, is it, really?
Yeah.
It's a reimagining of a character.
It's doing very well.
Redefining it, rather. Not imagining, redefining, really.
It did defy a lot of the criticism for going into it, because that's like taking Fawlty Tower, when they try to do an American Fawlty Towers, or if they made Doctor Who American, these British staples that you don't think would translate over here, but Elementary seems to be doing it.
They tried to do Fawlty Towers over here?
A long time ago in the 90s. God. I forgot what it's called, but they tried to do it.
I just sound really pleased I missed that.
Yes, so is everybody else. We try to forget about that. Let's talk about you in Gotham here. You're playing Alfred Pennyworth.
Yeah.
More of an interesting look into the life of Alfred in season 2 than in season 1, because season 1, Bruce's parents have died. It's still fresh. He's a kid now, filling the shoes of being sort of the parent to Bruce, and you're just trying to make sure he's okay. Now, in season 2, time to move on from grieving and time to make you into who you're going to be and live your life. As in any family, you had some struggles with him where you kind of did something that was against what Bruce thought would be better judgment. He was trying to continue on his dad's work, and you felt you were protecting him. He fired you, but you reconciled. Now you're in full training mode with Bruce, where you're not going to take any of his guff. You're not going to treat him like billionaire son anymore. Now you're taking the role of dad and looking out for his well-being here. They did put a spotlight onto something where Bruce was saying that you lived a very rough and dangerous life. Do they explore more of that going in through the rest of season 2?
I was talking to Bruno about this. I mean, you had elements in season 1 and stuff with when Reggie, his past, comes back to visit him. But the thing is, when they write, the showrunners were explaining to me, when you write things in the past, it becomes a lattice work of confusion. And I think that the interesting thing always is to find out about sort of subtextual elements of characters by going forward, by things that have affected them, things that may affect them in the future. And you definitely see Alfred sort of interacting with the real world again, not just with Bruce,
right,
in his physical manner, because he as you saw in season 1, why he was under the employ of the richest man in the world was because he can look after himself and look after the Wayne family. In fact, so much so he was made a guardian. You never asked to be a guardian,
right.
So you'll definitely see him sort of his former SAS training reveal itself again. You definitely start to realize, that their relationship becomes much more sort of contractual as well as fatherly, because you have to find a way of a hook of communicating with a teenage. You have to find a way of being able to communicate, and they make this contract after basically him firing him, to saying that they will work together, because otherwise he'd lose him. He knows that. Alfred knows that, but also he's growing to love him, because after his sort of folly in trusting an ex-friend and being stabbed, he sort of definitely questions his own mortality, and suddenly realizes he wouldn't complete his oath if he popped his clogs and died. So he has to be there for Bruce. So that's the journey that we're taking now, that you'll see them coming together, and you'll see the elements of Alfred's past in the going forward of training Bruce to becoming the man that we later know and love, who dons the cowl.
Right.
But it has to get to the bottom before we can reach the top, so he can rise phoenix-like from the ashes.
I know it was explained as to why you were picked to be the guardian, and why Bruce's dad trusted you and everything like that, but do they explore, or maybe you narrate more as to why the run-in or the connection that you had with Bruce's dad, as to why you came about in the first place?
I don't know.
No,
no. I honestly, I don't know. The thing is, it's like opening scripts on our show. It's like opening a Christmas present, and any one of the actors would tell you that. You never really know. You get general ideas of arcs, which way they're going, but you might well. I know subtextually. I wrote a Bible which I presented to Bruno and to Danny, and they had ideas as well. A character Bible, a sort of character study, that my opinion of this character. You try to stay away from the stuff that had been previously written. The text was written in previous performances, because you need to find someone live and breathe and find his own heartbeat. And I was kind of chuffed really later on when I started looking back at how many boxes we'd actually ticked in some of the sort of mythos that had been written about this character for 75 years. So yeah.
One of the good things about being in, I guess you could call this in a prequel universe, to where we usually pick up Batman, is where Bruce's parents are killed, and then it fast forwards to Bruce being an adult. It usually skips this period here, which you guys are exploring. But unlike some of the other stories, Michael Caine I thought was great in as Alfred in the
Michael
movies,
Goff as well.
Yeah. And you have I guess it's a privilege, really, where you have this opportunity where, even though there's certain parts of the origin you got to follow, you get to help interpret what makes Alfred later on.
Well, it's only when I started rewatching. I've watched every sort of incarnation of Batman and the Batman world all my life. I've always been a fan. Did
you read the comics too?
Yeah, I used to read them back, when I was a kid. Yeah, I've been reading the Jeff Johns ones recently as well, the Earth ones as well, which are really sort of interesting. But there was so many sort of like little sort of taps to where he came from, which Michael Caine did, which I thought was really interesting, and which I only sort of realised after I rewatched them after we'd started shooting Gotham, was that he said he fought in Yemen, and that's how I know for a fact the SAS were there. But he also never said he was with the SAS. He said he was a Marine with a Marine regiment. But the thing is, the SAS always say that they're seconded from one regiment to another. And there were these little sort of hints to his past, his previous sort of work.
When they come out with outlines and say, this is the next couple episodes, here's where the story arc is going, because it's new territory, do they ever say, how do you feel about this? Do you get some input of, like, what do you think Alfred would do in this situation, or what would he say here?
More so now, definitely. I think the thing was with season 1, we were given the honour of doing 6 more episodes when we'd actually reached episode 11, which was it was pandemonium in the writers' room, I should imagine, when we went from 16 to 22. So more so now, and more so that we're sort of deeply rooted and seated in our characters now, that we sort of have a much better idea in which way we're going. There are elements of that, but of course it starts off better in the beginning of the season when things are more sort of approachable and you get blocks of 4 scripts. Now we've caught up with ourselves. We've just finished the mid-season finale, which was just finished on Thursday. So you know what I mean? We were sort of backing up again. Now we get this breathing hiatus of 4 months where we're not on air. So we'll start to have more input and more sort of discussions into which way our characters are sort of going. But we all had the conversation now with Bruno, is that we've, I don't want to sound sort of arrogant, but we've basically now embodied the characters that we set out. The world now out there, the fanboys and fangirls, that's extremely vociferous, as you know.
Yeah.
And if they don't like something, like they were not keen in Alfred's behaviour to begin with.
Especially after season 1, they
were loud, and they were very loud about my sort of interpretation of where I was going with Alfred.
You were very bad. I mean, you still are, but it was more shown in season 1. You were very badass. Like, you were a no guff kind of guy. Like, you weren't taking anybody's shit.
That's right,
and I think that's what needed to be for that character, because when you get to the point that everybody knows, Alfred's still hard but a little softer because he's a family guy now, and rather than being a servant.
Exactly right. That's the route that we're taking, very much so. That was a great thing about Michael Gough's performance as well, which funny enough, it was on the TV the other day, was the genuine love and the parental love that he had, which Sir Michael didn't necessarily have. There was more of an understanding and a world weariness about Sir Michael's performance, but Michael Gough was absolutely wonderful as Alfred as well, and he was a sort of softer but a more parental. It had more of a sort of parental approach,
right?
And understanding. They almost moved together. You could see that they actually lived together. There was more of a sort of real, genuine, believable relationship, I think, between those two.
This season is billed as Rise of the Villains.
Yeah.
And it's going in a different direction than season 1, which was every week was, crime of the week kind of thing, almost a bit Law and Order-ish, rather than focusing on some of the smaller story arcs that could get bigger as the seasons go on. But now they're starting to focus more on that with season 2 here. We've seen origins for Poison Ivy, obviously the Penguin there. Now we're starting to see Bridget come into her own as Firefly. Jerome could have been the Joker, but maybe he's influencing the future Joker or whatever's going on there. Being a longtime Batman fan, you had to have some villains that were your absolute favorites.
Yeah, I mean, Clayface, Strange, Mad Hatter, but 2 of which Freeze is coming into the show,
right?
And Hugo Strange, which is the really interesting one, actually, because this is a huge tie-in. I can't give too much away.
I love that you just did not default to the key villains that everybody always goes to.
No.
I like when people have some of the smaller story villains, but they have a personal attachment to them.
Exactly. Well, I think that you're going to see a lot more of them. This season is called Rise of the Villains, but you're beginning to see sort of partnerships, aren't you? You're beginning to see relationships where you think, well, these 2 worlds are going to collide, and they're going to collide quite soon. So you think, well, what's going to happen in season 3? I actually know the idea behind season 3, and it's going to be, we've tapped at the Red Hood gang, we've tapped at the Joker legacy. We know Freeze is coming in. We know some of these more flamboyant characters that have costumes are coming in. The Riddler's now interacting with Penguin, and they've met. And you think, so where are we going with this? So the world is about to explode. Like I was saying to you before, it's a long, long, bumpy ride down for Gotham to need Batman to rise from the ashes phoenix-like. Just a long way down, and that's going to be the interesting thing. I mean, we're going to continue to descend into utter chaos. The great thing is about this season as well that we feel confident about is we've been split into 2, 11 episodes and 11 episodes. And I know that there's a story up with Galavan and Sister Tabitha, segues, and then there's going to be a break, and there's another element to the second part of season 2.
Right.
It's a bit confusing. But then but the thing is, the overall arc, that everything is embodied, and it's a very clever take.
One of the signs I saw as far as family bonding between Alfred and Bruce was the charity benefit with Jerome going crazy. And towards the end of it, well, throughout that episode, Alfred was kind of flirting with Detective Gordon's girlfriend, the
Leslie Tompkins.
And it wasn't known till the very end when all of a sudden you're walking out and you go, you knew the whole time. You let me. That really was, I think, the first kind of warm moment of Bruce kind of
them needling each other
and really making Alfred look kind of foolish in a loving way.
Exactly.
It wasn't just cold Alfred, I need this or that, Master Butler kind of thing. That was starting to break down and showing a family moment when he kind of dicked you over there. That was really a laugh aloud moment.
Yeah. It was great. I mean, it was great. And also I love the little sort of slight nod to the fact, I don't know if people, you're a fan, but Alfred and Leslie Tompkins were supposed to have an affair in the books, apparently, allegedly, she was his psychoanalyst. And so that was kind of interesting that Bruno actually sort of encompassed that. The writers encompassed that sort of element, the fact that I flirted. So people are out there that are really into that kind of stuff would have known that Alfred and Leslie Tompkins actually did meet later on in life, and she almost became like a surrogate mum to Bruce. Not in our version, of course. This is our reimagining.
Well, you just answered my next question. That's where I was going to go. But that being said, do we see a love interest somewhere down the line for Alfred?
I don't know, but
he can't be alone all the time.
No. Well, I know. I think we've sort of we've realised that he's got OCD. That he actually, I love that sort of that vehicle that we're now using. That you never see anyone else in the manor. That who does the dusting? Who does the cooking? Who does the driving? Who does everything? He does everything. He can't sleep because he has post-traumatic stress, and that's something that is another subtextual point, but it's a guise that basically people now have accepted, that Alfred does everything and he's always there. So he gets very little time. But he flirted, I don't know if you remember, he flirted with Fish Mooney, and he flirted with the two very beautiful ladies, and of course Leslie Tompkins played Marina.
He's very debonair.
Right. Yeah, he is. He's still
for such a gruff guy.
He's still got moves, mate.
Let me ask you about the discovery of the cave under the mansion there.
Yeah.
The door with the combination, which you guys blew open. Now, at one point, you just start destroying everything, thinking that you're protecting Bruce.
Yeah.
And you said, had I known what was down here, I never would have let you. But something seemed a little off about that. Did Alfred really know ahead of time and he's just playing coy with this?
Again, saying I'll tell the absolute truth is that I always thought that I did know to a certain degree what was down there. I spoke to Bruno, and I didn't know. I mean, the way that I played it, I knew that Thomas Wayne was doing something. I knew he was up to it. And listen, I was his confidant and his valet and everything like that. So I'm pretty convinced that I would have known what was kind of going on. But I was assured by Bruno, by the showrunners, that I actually didn't know what was behind the door. And that's the honesty answer.
Okay, fair enough. One other scene I want to bring up it was another laughing moment. You're waiting outside of the school for Bruce, and you're about to introduce that his training starts now. But you're sitting there, and you turn around, and Selena Kyle's on the wall, and she hops down in her overly dramatic Catwoman foreshadowing, as she does. And she's just standing there, and you turn around, and you clock her. And you said, I know you killed Reggie. Now, rightfully so, but still, the moment, if you didn't know the story and just happened to tune in, this older guy just punched this younger girl.
Slapped her.
Really was very funny.
That was the it's very interesting. You used to say funny because I tell you what, my phone spring fell out the side, and there's gales of abuse I got for bashing up a small young girl.
But it seemed justified.
I mean, it is justified. I mean, it still is the world of Gotham. She's worked for two of the biggest crime bosses.
Right.
She's stolen. She's murdered. She's stabbed. She carries a flick knife. She's a thief. She's an absolute crim.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is, and not only that, Alfred, is a notorious slap. We should never ever hit anyone, let alone a child. But in actual fact, her reaction told the exact story. Her reaction was she looked like a little girl for the first time. Going,
when she started crying.
You want to put on, be in the big world, put on some big boy trousers then, and take a slap in the face because this stuff really hurts. And it really shocked her. And in fact, it's going to be interesting. You see with their relationship, which way they start to go now. Because in actual fact, he was in a bizarre way doing the responsible thing.
Right.
It made her realize she was a child again.
And I'm not condoning, punching a girl or a woman or anything like that. But in the case of that story and the situation, the fact that, I guess by today's standards, that it was allowed, that scene in there. I think it was funny because I wasn't expecting it. It threw me off, so I laughed because I didn't know how to react to it. But the fact that they allowed it to happen really, and like you said, really showed where this is going and proved the point of the story. And I got to give you and everybody, behind Gotham there, kudos for going with that and really not constricting
So
the
putting
storytelling based on
modern
standards
interpretation
and
is
things like
exactly
that.
right. It's a big, dangerous, badass world out there, and the thing is, if you want to step up to the plate, and you got to be able to take it as well as give it.
Right.
And that was what Alfred was saying. It was Reggie stabbed him, but the thing was he wanted to take care of it. That's his part of his Bushido SAS oath. He says to Bruce, and he says
That
to
was
her, "This
your
is
kill.
My
Yeah.
kill. It's not my kill or my
Your vengeance.
my vengeance or my pursuit into whatever I was going to do to the guy." But it was a real moment, and people were genuinely sort of like shocked by it. But I still stand by it, and I stand by the sort of bravery in many respects to show. And also, it was a toned down version of the slap.
Right.
I mean, there was about 4 different versions, and people were convinced that it was a punch and a slap. And also, she's extremely she's a beautiful girl. I love her to death, Cam Campbell. And her character's much loved, but you want to kind of say, hang on a minute, guys, why? She's an appalling influence. She doesn't. She carries knives, she steals, she murders.
Right.
Really? Would you have that around your child? No, you wouldn't.
The kids are not kids in this show,
No,
and they're
not.
not treated like kids in this show, and that's the way it should be as far as the storytelling for Gotham being. It's not a wholesome place.
No.
It's a very dark and cruel world. That it's really showing reality, I guess, in reality. A lot of people kind of, put that foggy lens in front of reality. It's like, maybe we won't do it. No, he would exactly do that, and they're showing that.
Yeah, exactly.
To prove the point.
Yeah.
Before we go, I only have a couple minutes left here with you. Talking with Sean Pertwee, Gotham, Monday nights, 8 p.m. on Fox. 2 quick things. One, you've done so much video game work, which I'm always amazed with people who get the voiceover work for video games and animation and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing it quite early on. I do a lot of voiceovers anyway in my own country. But I play games, and I'm appalling. I've been absolutely appalling at playing the bloody things. I get shot in the face in the first 4 minutes. The only chance you've got in games like Call of Duty is you buy it on the first day,
right?
And you rush to a computer console to play it, and then you might last for 2 minutes. But by day 2, everyone's got the game, and you're just annihilated. But the thing is, I love the way that it's pushed technology. I've always sort of played the games. I still do play the games, and I was lucky enough. I kind of was into it before other people were doing voice work for games like that. I knew
before it was becoming a cool thing to do.
The cool thing to do. And I remember Brian Cox, who I was at the RSC with, and talking to Brian about it. And we did like Killzone, one of these sort of big great games for the
you were
PS4.
Colonel Haka. Yeah,
I was Haka, and then I went back to Radek and all this, and I played another character in it. And it was that we did motion capture. It's moved on so far, and I've always been interested in technology, and especially it genuinely affects. I know that 45 million people in the world buy something for 50 quid. I mean, that is bigger than any film that you could possibly sort of release.
Right.
So you go, come on, as an actor, there's an opportunity here to do something, of which I have to say sort of a lot of the computer manufacturers and game makers sort of like a regressive sort of dweebs that they think that they know everything, and they bloody don't, because the one thing they don't understand is sort of like drama. And I think that's going to be the interesting thing, is when they actually sort of manage to sort of amalgamate the two, technology, but leave the directing to some directors and some actors.
Well, outside of the first-person shooter games, a lot of the video games are well written now. Like there's really in-depth storytelling and multiple layers and arcs and things going on. So it's like you're playing an actual movie by being in the game.
I just actually did a game, funnily enough, with Nick Frost, who's in Shaun of the Dead and stuff like that. We just did one down the line to London. I can't remember the name of it, but it's completely immersive. It's complete virtual reality, and it's the first game of its type to do complete virtual reality. You wear these glasses and you're kind of immersed,
like the Oculus Rift kind of thing.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm running out of time with you, but 2 games that I want to give a note that recognized you from was Fable 3. And you were in Assassin's Creed Black Flag?
Something like that,
yeah. Yeah, like that. Great franchises to be a part of, by the way. So you got 2 great video game franchises. You got Gotham going on. Before we leave, I have to ask you, because I am a personal fan of your father and of Doctor Who. And that Halloween photo that you put out where you dressed as your dad just kind of, the term, blew up the internet. But people went nuts when you were donning your dad's old outfit.
Yeah, it was a bit of a panic thing. I was going to a party with a friend of mine, and I didn't know what to wear, and I just found the wig. I thought, I'll go as my dad. I had a couple of sherbets, a couple of tequilas. Didn't really realise what I was doing. Put it on the internet, and it absolutely went viral. It was kind of the weirdest thing. And even my mum said, "No, that's your papa, that's your dad." And she didn't even know it was me. Then there was a sort of dearth of stuff where people were photoshopping my head and putting my dad's hair on it and
Right.
stuff like that, which was hilarious. And boy, do I look like him.
And I mean, he's such a beloved series. Your
Yeah,
dad
it's
is very
fantastic.
beloved. And there's a lot of homages and callbacks to your dad's time as the Doctor in the current 12th Doctor
That's
that
right.
Peter Capaldi's playing. There's a lot of throwbacks, some one-liners, and
What he
the
wears.
cadence, what he wears, and sometimes the actions. Other than wanting a roadster to drive around in, he's pretty much showing a lot of influence from your dad's
Well,
period.
he used to run my dad's fan club when he was a boy. When he was 12 years old, he used to run the Doctor Who fan club in Scotland. And I remember meeting Peter years and years and years ago when I was very little, in fact. And he was being very kind to my family when my father passed away. And like you said, there are these homages and odes and nods to my dad. The sort of the silk lining, red silk lining, and the posturing, it's there. And it must be an incredible thing for him to do after being a boyhood fantasy, playing that character, to then later become Doctor Who. 12.
With showing that photo and it becoming as big as it did, has Moffat or BBC reached out to you saying that maybe at some point we'll do a flashback to your dad and want you to do that?
They never said anything like that, but I was, I was asked to do something which I couldn't do in my hiatus, but I'd love to go and do something in some capacity. But my dad's very large Cuban heel boots are big to fill, you know what I mean?
If they did call you up and say, hey, we want to do a little, meeting of the doctors kind of thing, would you go and portray your dad?
I don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
Let's try.
Just thought I would ask. Yeah. Sean Pertwee, thank you so much. Sean Pertwee on Twitter. Gotham, Monday nights, 8 p.m. on Fox. He plays Alfred Pennyworth. Of course, you knew that. Sir, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for coming on. And next time you're in New York, I'd love to talk to you again.
Well, I'm here all the time. Thank you very much.
All right, will do. Thanks.